starting the church, the conference was like, what is the name? And it felt a little, when you're saying the name for the Storied Church, just kind of feels like, what? This past week, Key and I were at somewhere the other day, and someone goes, ask us, do we go to church? And it was like a moment of just pure, no, we don't. No, we don't. And it's like, yes, we do. And they're like, what church do you go to? And I was like, Storied Church. And they're like, what is that? And and I'm the pastor. And I think they were trying to invite us to their church, and so it just came really weird, really fast. Okay, well, this conversation's over. But I think a lot of times, in the reflection in the name, is not really so much about the Christ story. That is a story that does matter, but I think it's a story that we tell a lot, and we should tell a lot. But I think the heart of this community is that there are stories that exist within congregations, neighborhoods that aren't told, or we tell certain narratives. And the vision of this community is that we would provide space for people to tell their stories about the narrative, about who they are, and to provide that space. And so that's what Amy and I have had a bunch of lunches together the past couple weeks, and I hope our lunches do continue. But she's going to tell a part of her narrative, and I'm really so excited. We met Amy when we were 100% online, and it's such a beautiful narrative to see her in this place saying, I want to tell a part of my story. I wanted to read a couple of things. There's a great article. It's On Being, I think, is the podcast. That's called "We Survive by Telling Stories." Great article to read by Carolina. I'm going to butcher her name. Hinojosa Cisneros. I just want to make sure these are not my quotes. But she said these things about storytelling, that storytelling is a form of prayer. The posture and attention we give to storytellers as they elicit feelings and induce our bodies to draw near is the same engagement we see when we position ourselves to pray. And I read that quote because I think this is where the sermon goes, and we think, well, is this different than the sermon, or is this different than worship or prayer? And the answer is no. This is one to which we maybe even, quite possibly, are drawing even closer than we do to something like a sermon. Also, she says this, in the stories we tell, we find that God labors with us, for us, and never against us. We tell stories at evening meals, lunch reunions, and when a family is gathered to share more than meals and gossip. This is what it is to be a church. Preserving our stories preserves our faith. It's in this that the history of a body of people resists being erased. And then one last thing. She says, we pass on these narratives so that we are not forever wandering in an in-between space. We tuck our children and grandchildren in the folds of our arms to inspire life. We task our family and friends with the call to deep wonder and imagination. Because if we continue to keep stories, we can continue to be brave and live a life with incredible faith. And so I read this great article, and I'll share the link to it, but I think it's really centering us into how valuable and sacred it is when we provide space for storytelling. And so I wanted to read a prayer by Kelly Ray Roberts, who's a blogger, and a prayer for Amy as she comes forward to tell part of her story. Let us pray. May we know our lives as beautiful, messy, masterful works of art. May we celebrate our fullness, the highs and the lows. May we remain rooted in our heart's truths and not fall into comparison. May we believe that we are immensely valuable, wise, and good now. May we embrace our power to retreat and refine our stories. May we honor our wholeness. May we speak our gratitude. And may we be always brave in love. Amen.
It's an honor for me to be here and to give a little bit of my story. A lot of y'all know the big thing that's happened to me in my life, and I'm finally to the place in the first 2 minutes of a conversation I don't share that I've had a kidney transplant. So kind of getting back to me and who I am.
You click that.
Kind of want to give a little glimpse of who I am and how I came to be here at Storied Church. Some people who've been in the area a long time, Rodney knows. He's my church husband, so of course he knows. But he back in the 60s, there was a children's home here in Elon, and that's how we came to be in the area, all 7 of us. When I was 3, my mom passed away, and our dad was not able or willing to take care of us. He wanted control, but he didn't want the responsibility, and he was an alcoholic. So, you know, and a lot of back then, I don't think the fathers took care of us. So if we'd have stayed there in South Carolina, it would have been, you know, my oldest sister taking care of us. But so that's kind of why we went to Elon. I had an aunt in the area who was my mother's sister, who promised my mom when she passed that we would be taken care of one way or the other. And so she got us to the children's home that was called Elon Home for Children. And it was pretty traumatic at 3 years old going. I truly remember the first day. And the very first place we went, Allison, was Holt Chapel. So just remember Holt Chapel, because that's a big part of my story and who and how it ends up. And we would always have chapel services there. We'd have the windows open and singing, you know, what a friend we have in Jesus. And I was a good little girl. Well, I could sing it. I can't now. But, you know, I didn't care back then if I didn't know how to carry a tune. But, so, like I said, it was traumatic, but it was also a great thing for us to have, you know, been taken care of in the way we were. But throughout that, I never felt totally worthy and always a little scared about something. And then I realized years later when I went back to work at the children's home that the thing that I was scared of is, it said in my read my records, and that I wouldn't bring any friends over to play, not because I lived at a children's home and was embarrassed, because that was really what I knew, but it was because I didn't want them to think I was a homosexual. You know, this was at 5 years old. So there was always that underlying fear of not being accepted, and, you know, plus you're in a place with 15 people at a time. Yeah, as a little one you get kind of lost. But then throughout the years, yeah, I pretty much stayed there, but I did do foster homes, and they always sent me back. So I don't know what that was about. But Elon, it was so ingrained in me and the way that I lived and the way, I guess, you know, I probably needed the interactions that I was getting there instead of, you know, all the attention on me because of, you know, I was an anxious child. I'm an anxious adult too. And but that's okay because you feel what you feel. I remember Jason telling me that it was okay to feel anxious when right before my transplant, and so I have always remembered that it's okay to be anxious. But there were difficult years of feeling not worthy, and that's kind of what my story surrounds, is how I got to feeling worthy of community and being accepted and serving others. But I always sought that, but as a quiet introvert. Some people may not believe, but I'm really introverted. But I do love to talk too. But so after all those years of high school, and it felt like all those years, I decided that I was going to go to a very, very, very conservative Christian college. And I learned a lot, and I felt love. But I also still had that underlying fear, oh, God, they're going to find out about my sexuality. And if they had, I would have been cast away into the night, never to be seen again. So even though I learned and I felt love and I met God, there was always that, oh, I'm just not worthy. I'm just not worthy. And, not knowing that there was not anything I could do anyway to feel the love of God and be worthy of that. I mean, we just are. But it took me a long time to feel that, and I'll get to that in a minute. So after that, I decided to return to work at Elon Homes, which was a great experience. I credit Elon with having my life today, and it kind of brought me to find my tribe. Even though still, I knew that if I came out, that there was a great possibility that I would be fired. But I found people. I went back and worked with people who helped me grow up, and that felt good. And it felt good to give back to the community. And so went through that, and then I came out after I left there, of course, and found a good community in Raleigh and Durham and Chapel Hill. I mean, where does anybody else go? But there, because back then you didn't find that community here in Alamance County, and so got involved with a church, which is Metropolitan Community Church, which is the gay church. And it was good. I enjoyed it. I loved it. I met good people, and I still have good friends from there. And through that, I helped birth the church in Durham. It was a place that it was for everyone. And it's not a gay church. I mean, there's no such thing. But that's what it's called for some reason. But there was a need for a place. I don't want to say a safe place, because I read today that church is not a safe place. It's a place to to fight and wrestle with your beliefs and have your beliefs questioned. Because if you never question your beliefs, are they really yours? And so I helped birth that church, but by then I was not disillusioned with them, but in all, that with church, I decided that I must step away. I never stepped away from a belief, but I did step away from the organization of it and the mess of it, and I never felt, well, I probably am not, I was told, you're going to hell. So I thought, well, why sit through it if I'm still going to hell? But, but I did feel of worth, and I felt of community. But it was still with a longing to find. I thought, it was a longing to find love. Well, I did, and that wasn't it. But it was nice. But you know how it is. When I was starting to get sick about 2 years ago, and I was scared, because if I didn't go on dialysis, well, at first I was like, didn't have to have dialysis, but then the reality hit, and I got put in the hospital, and it was about the second week. No, that was right after our very first time I had come to the park, and that's when we were meeting over at Hope Park, for those who weren't a part of that. And I'll never forget how welcomed I felt. By the time it was over, I had Jackie's life story and she had mine. And I always say to her, you were the first person who spoke to me outside of you and Gaddy. I'd already been in correspondence with y'all. And it was just a very trying time. The day I went in the hospital because my kidneys failed, my sister died. So it was like, So went to dialysis, and I hated it. But it makes you kind of face something. I was told, either you're on dialysis or you're probably going to die within 3 to 4 weeks. I was like, I better stick it out. And but at the same time, I got put on the transplant. Well, I got accepted to try to get on the transplant list. So at the same time, my sister Trudy, who I call my helicopter donor, because helicopter parent, she right there. I can't mess this kidney up; she'll kill me. I guess I could mess it up. I'm gonna die either way. But she was the only person we tested because I knew that she was going to be the one to give me the kidney. So I didn't ask anyone else, although my best friend Lyanna wanted to. I was like, well, let's just wait because I know, I just knew it. She knew it too. Trudy knew it too. And so I found Storied Church and found the Tove, small groups. Am I saying that right? Tove?
Yeah.
Okay, just want to make sure. I never heard that word before. Started going to that. On my dialysis days, it was one thing that just really saved my, just like almost saved my soul, was to have that interaction and to be fed. And through that, well, I'd already met Allison, and who's leaving us, her and Daniel, Jason used to break us into these little small groups and give us all sticky pads, and we had, I can't remember what the subject was, but we were the only two in the group, and so after that, I immediately felt like I wanted to be friends with her. And after that, we shared a couple lunches at Elon, at the town of Elon, and found out that she had access to Hope Chapel, which has always been a big part of my life. When I lived there, when I worked there, it was my safe place. So one lunch, she got the key and let me go in there, and it was like, whew, it was overwhelming because it's probably been 20 years since I'd been in there, but it smelled the same. She asked me if I wanted to go to the basement, and I was like, well, I've been in daycare when I first went there in the basement. And the thing I remembered, it always smelled like somebody dumped it in the bathroom. So I was like, no, we don't need to go down there. But I was able to absorb and just feel a sense of belonging that I'd had when I was growing up. And then, then bring it into the present day. And because we still use the chapel when I worked there. And but the campus has been sold to the children. I mean, from the children's home to the university. It was a college back then when I lived there, and Elon College has a big part of who I am. We were never supposed to cut through there, and there was a low wall. So coming home from choir practice at the community church, and I know it's weird that I was in junior choir, but I was. So we decided to cut through there. But lo and behold, there was a big German Shepherd, and he chased us. And so we were running for our life, and I scaled the wall, but my shoe drops on the other side of the wall. So I had to walk home with no shoe and tell what I had done. So I always remember that for some reason every time I ride by there. So we got to the point where Trudy was approved to be my donor. And which you want to feel worthy and full of love, at the same time you feel so not worthy to receive such a gift, because it wasn't a gift, it was life. I mean, it was a gift, but literally it was life, because who knows, if dialysis failed, I was going to meet Jesus, I guess. But and I was okay with that by this point. But I really felt like I had become a part of this community already with our small group, and that's when we were a little bit bigger small group. So we want everybody who can to come out, because this book is going to be wonderful. And we actually in the small group, we were reading, this last book was Sin of Certainty, and it was a talk about feeling of worth. And never in any church have I felt of worth until, Allison opened the door basically to my past to bring it into the present. So 3 or 4 days before we had to go in for the surgery, we the small group, this might make me cry because it touched me, the small group, our group met over there and had a prayer for me. And what it did for me is it brought you, my church family, a very good friend of mine, Trudy and Jack's Trudy's husband, and someone who meant so much to me at Elon. It was like bringing all my parts of my life together. And never, I can say I never have felt more love and worthy of what y'all gave to me that night and what the church continues to give. And so I always think of Allison when I think of Hope Chapel. And I always will, even though you're going to be far, far away. But and one thing that, a story I told, because I had just read it, I don't know if y'all are familiar with Cross North School. It was, it's up in the mountains. And there was a lady who wrote the book Suitcases. And if you've ever been a part of foster care or group care, or, back then it was, we just lived there. It wasn't like you're going to move on, you're going to live there. And it talks about suitcases. And I remember my suitcase, because you had to have it, and because I did a couple stints in foster care, and one was really, really good, and one was not great. But so that's why I'm so thankful to Elon. And Cross North started out as a school plus a I guess like a boarding school, but for troubled youth and those who were orphaned. But I was reading up on something, and there was a guy talking about different events of his life, and what he came to conclude, because somebody was always there for him in those moments, that when you tell someone that I am here, it's the holiest words that you can say and hear. And that's what I feel like I have here. And this is where I have found that I'm connected with a community that feels more like a family. And that's not something I've always had. Although as adults, we all grew, when we grew up, we all came back together. But that's different. I have a family of maybe 100 or so other kids around the area that I grew up with that I find as family. But here I found a family that I think feeds me and says I am here. Because one thing, I didn't do well with the transplant, and actually probably the last, I guess, 2 to 3 months, if that long, is the best I felt. And those of you who were in small group probably knew more that I wasn't doing that well. And so at the hospital, when I had the transplant, I won't go into detail, but I was so sick. And Jason came, and I was giving up, and I was like, I think God's forsaken me. I think God, I don't know why God's letting this happen. And at the same time, I said, can you pray for me? So it's like, even though, and thank God he was there. And, the community, I'll never forget when they were taking me to do something deep down in my arm. And they said they weren't going to do any anesthesia. a central line, I guess. I'm not familiar because I wasn't in my right state of mind. I remembered a comment on Facebook that King had told me, breathe, just breathe. And then through all that, that's when it really started to turn around for me. I was like, I can do this, I can do this. And so in so many ways, y'all have been here. Yeah, Chad on his Facebook, I love it. I just, I enjoy seeing him and just the acceptance that I have felt from day one. So that's kind of a glimpse of who I am. I've got almost 60 years of other stories, but we won't go into those. But I appreciate you listening.